get that little good island game and you build up into Thursday and Friday here into your first Saturday, I think it's a great way to start the season.
Man, me too. What were you doing in Las Vegas last week?
Well, we were kicking off our new podcast, Check the Mic. We had Sam Monson and I, my podcast partner, we officially left PFF last Wednesday. And then our first day with the 33rd team on Thursday, we flew to Vegas. And we're staying at Circus Sportsbook. They had a little Radio Row event promoting their $1 million contest. So we hung out there for a couple days, kicked off our show, and, just enjoyed a couple days out in Vegas.
All right. So I went to Circus Sportsbook 2 years ago when we went to the NFL draft. It's the most amazing sports book. There's some unbelievable ones out there, but it's the most amazing sports book I've been to. Had you been there, and what did you think about it?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. My real story is the owner, Derek Stevens, used to own the minor league team in Las Vegas when I played there. So we would stay at the Golden Nugget that he owned and hang out at his casino, which was Golden Gate, and he would kind of hang out with us back 15 years ago. So I've kind of known him for a while. And then opened Circa, and they opened us welcomed us with open arms. So it's an unbelievable place.
Man, that's so cool. All right, very nice. All right, you ready to talk some ball?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Oh, real quick, who is your are the Florida Gators your college team? I can't remember, Steve.
They are, yeah. I was mid '90s Danny Werfel fan, so jumped on the Gators bandwagon. As a Northeasterner, I don't have like a real team up there,
All right, Miami at Florida this weekend. I don't know what direction to go. Real quick, and I again, we don't have to break it down. I just wanted your thoughts on who went. Yeah, I think Napier's a good coach. It's just weird things have been happening at Florida for a while, and I think Cristobal's a hell of a recruiter and not a good coach. But has a lot of talent. It's Miami at Florida. Who do you think wins?
I'm going to say Florida pulls it off. They got that terrible schedule. I mean, I could break down college ball now too. I'm doing it all. That ridiculous schedule that Florida has, that gauntlet through the SEC, plus all the non-conference games, including Miami. But I think Florida has a pretty good pass game with Graham Mertz coming back, and Napier, if he just wins 7 or 8 games, kind of holds the fort while all the recruits get in, and Lagway takes over probably next year. I think they'll be okay. They just have to get through this grind of a schedule. I'll say they pull it off against Miami.
Okay, if they pull it off, they can go 7-5. You don't want to. I agree with you. You need some stability and continuity. So you need Napier to go 7-5 ish with that schedule. And you're exactly right. You got a dude at quarterback behind Graham Mertz, and if you can do that, then you can kind of get him rolling, and maybe Florida can come back. But we got some good games, man. Notre Dame at A&M. I mean, that's wild that Riley Leonard was with Elko at Duke last year, and now Riley Leonard's at Notre Dame and Elko's at A&M. I think that's an unbelievable storyline. I don't know if Clemson can stay on the field with Georgia. And then where you were last week, LSU and Southern Cal out in Vegas, but I think LSU I think they imposed their will in the second half on the Trojans. Steve Palzzolo.
Yeah, so I know like the USC story is, can they overhaul that defense, but they have questions on offense as well. Lincoln Riley's always been pretty good offensively, but if that defense gets run over again, by an SEC team, those questions will start immediately. The transfer portal just opens up so much. I'm doing some work with college teams on that now, and how to sift through that and how to evaluate players and figure out. It's an amazing time because not only do you have to figure out who the best players are, you're going to have to figure out how to pay them under a salary cap. It is a crazy time in college football. So doing some work with, college teams, trying to help them out, navigating that landscape. But the Riley Leonard thing with A&M too, I think the tough thing to predict is how well A&M plays, with Elko, with the new coach. How quickly do they hit the ground running?
Right.
Because Notre Dame's got a little bit more stability, but they've got some offensive line questions for the first time in a while. So, look, college football doesn't always deliver in week one. I think there's enough good games in all the windows. I think it's going to be a pretty entertaining week one.
Oh, I do too. I do too. I think a couple of those games will be really good and go down to the fourth quarter with us. Steve Palazzolo, his new podcast, Check the Mic. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Okay, before I get into the NFL and Dak and Gardner Minshew and CD and some things, have you watched the Connor Stallions Netflix documentary, Steve P?
I did not. I did not get around to it yet.
Okay.
All I hear is all the Michigan people loving Connor Stallions like he's a cult hero. That's all I've heard so
far. I kind of roll my eyes because, I mean, we're in the SEC, and I've grown up in the SEC, and I'm sitting there going, really? I mean, you know, he was good at what he did. And, you know, it sounds like he was playing chess while you were playing checkers. But it's entertaining. It's not great, but he is in it, and he is pretty damn transparent. So, you know, super sharp kid, Marine, Naval Academy coaching. No wonder Belichick and him were so good at that. It's that Naval Academy deal, man. When you go through there, you know how to steal sons. You're just better than everybody else, and everybody else gets mad. All right, let's go to what did you make of the Cowboys prolonging signing CeeDee Lamb? They could have done this in March or April. They just did it a couple of days ago. How do you think Steven and Jerry handled the CeeDee Lamb deal?
I mean, I don't think it ended up mattering a whole lot as far as the price tag or anything like that, but part of it's probably just, you know, once the negotiations get to the wire, you're more inclined the biggest thing. So they have that piece in, and now they're going to have to figure out Micah Parsons over the next year. Obviously have to figure out Dak and what they want to do there. I mean, they always seem to get these things done, even though it's late, and it's not probably the best business move to wait that long as the market changes. You have teams like the Eagles that do the opposite. They tend to go a year earlier with some of those big contracts, and then you're sitting there 2 years later saying, wow, that's a steal for A.J. Brown, or that's a steal for, you know, other players on the team, or Jalen Hurts even before the quarterback market exploded. So, look, I think the Cowboys eventually get there with Dak and with Micah Parsons, and got to a good spot with CeeDee Lamb, and I've got more questions about the receivers around him, you know, than what CeeDee's bringing to the table.
Yeah, it's a pretty significant drop-off, but you know more than we do. How would you describe the drop-off for the Cowboys wide receiver room from CeeDee and then the rest of the group, Steve?
I mean, Brandon Cooks is still good and dependable. I kind of talked him up last year with you, and it took him a little bit to get going, but he had just been, you know, Cooks, so dependable, you know, for the majority of his career as a very good number 2 wide receiver. I thought he took maybe a step back as a whole last season. But he's still capable. Beyond that, it's just a whole bunch of question marks. They've got Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Brooks, Ryan Flournoy. It's just a whole bunch of questions when, again, I would rather, I mean, I liked what they used to have, right? I liked when you used to say, you have Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. Oh, by the way, we just drafted CeeDee Lamb and we're adding him to the mix. Oh, by the way, we have Dalton Schultz at tight end. And so as a defense, when you have 4 pass catchers to really worry about down to down, it's a lot harder to play defense. And right now they have 1.5, right, with CeeDee and Brandon Cooks, would say. So from that perspective, you know, they're behind. They're behind a lot of other teams that do have 3 and 4 options to really worry about it. I think Jake Ferguson at tight end, though, you know, he adds a little bit of athleticism that can work the middle of the field. So I like him, but I would rather see a deeper receiving core, because that's when Dak's had his most success, is when he's had a little bit more depth at receiver.
Where would you? What are your expectations for the Cowboys? Maybe a wild card berth?
I mean, obviously they could compete for the NFC East. Obviously, I mean the Eagles are probably better on paper, and I love what Howie Roseman does there, but they absolutely collapsed last year under Nick Sirianni. So NFC East is certainly in play. I mean, it's probably 12 wins and a first-round playoff exit, right?
Ouch!
They're the most difficult team to analyze, because the analyst in me is like, oh, you know, just keep winning 12 games. At some point, you're going to get on a playoff run, and you're going to make it to a Super Bowl, but they and I hate when media types imply that players get nervous at playoff time and this and that. It's like, yeah, they're professionals. They'll be fine. But the Cowboys kind of resemble that, right? They play differently in the playoffs. They kind of, they looked a little off last year against the Packers. They looked off against the Niners, those couple playoff games the last few years. So tough to predict what Dallas is going to do because they keep, faltering in the playoffs.
Give me your top 5 power rankings in the NFC.
Oh, I think the Niners are 1. I'd say Niners, Lions, Eagles, Cowboys, and probably the Packers.
Okay.
That sound right? Did I forget anybody? I think that's right.
I think the Rams have a shot now that Stafford's back. Do you think that they could be, now that he's back, they could be the surprise team?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if he's healthy, I really like the Seahawks, too. I've spent a lot of time this offseason talking up the Seahawks. I think both the Rams and the Seahawks can do some damage in the NFC West. If Stafford's healthy, absolutely. I thought he played great last year. It was his best season, I would say, that didn't show up statistically, Stafford. One of the best years of his career. And remember, last year at this time, we didn't know what the Rams were going to be. They seemed so young. It was a whole bunch of rookies and second-year players with Stafford and Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp. And all of a sudden, Puka Nacua breaks out, and Tyron Williams breaks out, and Kobe Turner on the defensive line breaks out. So they've done a really nice job putting a young nucleus intact there with the Rams. And if Stafford's healthy, Cooper Kupp stays healthy with Puka, oh, yeah, they could absolutely do some damage. They've reshaped that offensive line over the last 2 years. So, yeah, I like the Rams quite a bit. I'm not sure they're, as good as the Lions or as good as the Niners and some of those other teams in the NFC. But the Rams, and again, I throw the Seahawks in that mix as teams that could do some damage.
Steve Palazzolo, his new podcast, Check the Mic, on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line, talking some NFL with us on the Out of Bounds show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, brought to you by an ice-cold Stella Artois. Steve, give me the top. Will you rank the top 5 coaches in the NFC?
Top 5 coaches. Well, I'll say Kyle Shanahan.
Yes.
He's got a history of, being one of the best. Dan Campbell. Got to put Dan Campbell up there. Matt LaFleur has to be up there.
McVay?
Sean McVay. Yes, I always forget McVay. He's got to be up there. He's probably up there with LaFleur, 3 and 4. And normally, last year at this time, I would have said Sirianni is up there. But really, that collapse last year, going from one of the best teams in the NFL to one of the worst down the stretch, literally one of the worst, and they had no chance in the playoffs against the Bucs. The Eagles' collapse gave me pause when it comes to Sirianni. But yeah, I think, again, Kyle Shanahan, Dan Campbell, whatever, Matt LaFleur and Sean McVay, whichever order you want there. Both guys have been extremely consistent. Of course, McVay has a Super Bowl, but, you can put McVay 3.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Sirianni, I think, could be there, but I have got some serious questions about how things finished last year.
Okay. And then top 5 front offices in the NFC.
Well, definitely, I love the Eagles and what they've done, and the Lions. I mean, we're talking about a lot of the same teams here. The Lions have been one of the better rebuilds that I've ever seen. Just brick by brick, adding piece after piece to the point where they have as good of a starting 22 plus depth, I would say, as they're in the top 3 around the league right now from a roster perspective. So I think the Lions have been fantastic. The Eagles have been excellent for a while. You're going to hate hearing the Cowboys are good, but they've been one of the best drafting teams over the last 6, 7, 8 years.
But they're terrible in free agency. So
it depends on how you want to judge this, because some people would say you can't just always be good at the draft. It is you can go on runs, right? Seattle Seahawks had that incredible run of drafting early 2010s, and then it slowed down, right? They came back down to earth. The Saints have had unbelievable runs, and then it slows down for 3 or 4 years. So some would say it's mostly luck, right? You just have, the right years. They accidentally got Micah Parsons when they wanted some corners. They got CD Lamb to fall, that type of thing. But you have to give them credit for taking those players. The Cowboys have added more young, long-term pieces, or as many as any team in the league over the last few years. So I think they deserve credit. I think some credit for that. The Packers, again, do a really nice job of building, a really young team. And then, Les Snead and the Rams, the Niners have to be up there as well, but Les Snead and the Rams, just from a process standpoint, they're always evident flowing, right? They went for it for a couple of years, and then they had to take a step back. They couldn't make any moves in free agency. They reset the roster. And then last year, again, they found all those young players. You got to give Les Snead and the Rams a ton of credit.
Okay. All right.
Did I get 5?
Yeah, no, that works. I love what you're saying about Detroit and the way that they built. And Howie Roseman is a freak with the Eagles. Now, would Lynch and the 49ers be in your top 3 or 4, or would right outside of that?
I mean, they have to be as well, because they have so many high-end players, and again, when you're judging, a lot of times you judge teams and say, oh, they wasted a pick on this quarterback. It's like, well, the Niners wasted multiple draft picks to trade up for Trey Lance, and they've still managed to build one of the best rosters in the NFL. That's just the nature of it. You're going to have misses. You're going to have – Howie Roseman chose Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson, right? So it's not about every single move, but it's the process. Howie's a great process guy. The Niners have done a really good job managing their cap. Now they're working on managing their cap, as Brock Purdy's going to have to get paid, and just finding elite players, especially in late first into the second round, finding those elite players, trading for Trent Williams. A lot of good moves over the last few years. So, I think the Niners deserve credit. And now Adam Peters is the GM in Washington. He's coming from San Francisco. I already like what he's started to do there. So I think the Commanders have a chance to make a lot of improvements over the next couple of years as well.
I don't want to hear that. I wanted them to be bad because Dak and Dallas are in the NFC East. So that's not awesome. Okay. Steve Palazzolo, his new podcast, Check the Mic, and it'll be NFL with a little college football.
It's mostly NFL, but now that I'm freed up a little bit, I'm not really doing. I was doing product managing stuff at PFF and everything. I'm freed up. I'm thinking about doing a draft show just on Fridays or something at some point.
Ooh.
So I'm trying to sprinkle in some draft or college football as we get off the ground, but it's mostly 6+ hours of NFL content throughout the week.
There we go. All right, Gardner, I got a couple of minutes. Gardner Minshew wins the job at the Raiders. I never had any doubt. What do you think Minshew and the Raiders can do this year, Steve P?
They'll be feisty. I always call Minshew tank-proof. If you want him as your bridge quarterback and you're hoping to get a good draft pick next year, it's not going to happen with Minshew. Probably not going to happen. So, I think they'll do a little bit. They'll do some damage. They're going to need the defense to play as well as they did down the stretch. I think that's going to be tough to replicate. But he's got some dudes to throw to with Devontae Adams, with Jacoby Myers, and real interested to see how Brock Bowers does. I think he'll be excellent right away as a weapon, pairing with Michael Mayer, the second-year tight end. I think the offensive line is good enough. So, yeah, I think they could do some damage and, be one of those mid-tier type of teams that surprise some people. And it's going to be tough to sneak into the playoffs again, or be on the cusp of the playoffs like Minshew was with the Colts last year. But, again, I think they'll do some damage this year with Minshew at quarterback.
All right, so Steve, Jackson Meadows is my producer. He's a Saints fan, and he's playing fantasy football. What do you have for him as far as the Saints? 7-10? What are you looking at?
Man, I've just been down on the Saints this offseason. Most teams, you come into the season and there's a lot of positivity, right? I'm having a tough time with the Saints. The offensive line is a big question for me. Losing Ryan Ramczyk to injury was just massive. Kind of forced their hand to take a tackle in the first round. I like Fuanga, who they drafted, but they're moving him to the left side. So I got questions on the offensive line. I don't know if they've restocked that defense well enough over the last couple of years. A lot of pressure on some of those young defensive linemen. The good news is it's still the NFC South.
Yeah.
And so I like the Falcons in the South and what they've done, but you've got a chance to beat out the Falcons, to beat out the Bucks. The Saints were right on the doorstep last year. They were tied with the Bucks record-wise. So you get the high end of Derek Carr, they got a chance to do some damage. It feels like the roster has just been losing depth over the last few years, though.
All right, I've only got a minute. I know you don't play fantasy football anymore, but you did for a while. Do you have a fantasy football tip for Jackson Meadows?
I mean, it's the basic tip. You got to wait on your quarterback. This was like when Blake would text me all the time in the middle of his draft. Pick, right? He's still texting me, who do I pick? You got to wait on your QB, stock up on your 3-down running backs if you can the first 2 rounds. So you can have 8 receivers, running backs, and, a high-end tight end. And then grab your quarterback. That's
okay.
it.
And, hey, what's the name of that food that's so bad in Cincinnati?
Skyline chili.
Skyline chili. Yeah, we had fun with that.
People are going to be so mad at me that I trash Skyline everywhere I go.
I love it.
You do?
I think it's great that you trash it.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, I wouldn't eat that garbage. Good Lord. I mean, I don't even like chili really anyway, but especially crappy chili.
Ruby's. Jeff Ruby's is a great way to rep Cincinnati. Jeff Ruby's Steakhouse.
It's fantastic.
Cincinnati.
I was at the one in Lexington last month. All right, buddy. I'm looking forward to the season. Thanks, dude.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Steve Palazzolo, his new podcast, Check the Mic, and you'll want to check it out on YouTube or Apple or Spotify. We are the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone ESPN. Lunch today brought to you by the amazing Greek wings at Aplos and the Renaissance.